time, if you're watching the replay or if you're streaming this live, thank you so much for joining us for Monday Meditations with Juan. I'm your host tonight. My name is Chuck Nix, aka the Bearded Wino. You can find me on Instagram, but you can easily find me if you are local to the Jackson metro area at Bravo Italian Restaurant and Bar. Please stop by and have a glass of wine or cocktail or dinner with me. I'd love to say hi. So let's just talk about a few things that are going on here at Bravo. We just finished up a cocktail class and we're educating our team on being able to get you the best beverages possible. But also what we're doing here is we are having monthly events that will be happening. The next one on February 28th from the Skurnik profile. We'll have some fantastic wines featured here with some tasting options from our kitchen. We're going to be getting those to you, and you'll just sign up on bravobuzz.com, our website. And you can also like us on Facebook here if you're watching this and you're a friend of us on Facebook. And you can follow me on Instagram. My name is Chuck Nix, and at Bearded Wino is how you would find me on Facebook. And you can find all replays and other things relating to Bravo and wine education and culture and hospitality in the South. So let's talk about what we're doing in this interview series. It is called Monday Meditations with Wine. This began with a gentleman by the name of Charles Springfield, who's become a friend in the wine world with me. And he started doing this thing in 2020. He's going to come on and talk to you more about that. But this is a way to connect hospitality, culinary, and beverage professionals around the country. What we're doing now is we're going to be highlighting those in the South because that's where we are. And we're going to be moving forward with that effort and initiative. And we're happy to have you along for the journey. So I'm going to go ahead and get Charles in here, and we're going to talk about how things are going with him and what we're doing in the future. So let's get him in here talking about some things. This dude's awesome too. You guys got a great story in front of you. Charles.
Hey, Chuck.
What's going on, man?
Not too much, just hanging in there. Case of the Mondays, but we'll get to Tuesday pretty soon.
We'll get to Tuesday soon. But hey, look, we have the opportunity to really kind of relax and chill out. We just made it through a weekend here at the restaurant. How was your weekend?
It was good. We had a little snowstorm here, so we had a nor'eastern. So it was a little bit chilly and icy and cold, but a nice way to kind of hibernate for a little bit. So,
well, I'm glad you got a chance to stay in. Now, you say snowstorm. You're in Manhattan right now.
Yes.
A snowstorm for y'all isn't too uncommon, is it?
Not too uncommon. And in the city, I think we maybe get 2 or 3 inches, depending on where you are in the city. But like in the, I think upstate and like Long Island, they got maybe like 10, 12 inches. So we weren't so bad. Yeah.
If we see a snowstorm in Mississippi, you can go and call it the end of the world. The grocery store might shut down eventually. That's it. Well, look, man, I'm happy you're here with us and made it through the snowstormy weekend. All right. So it's Monday Meditations with Juan. We must be drinking something, right?
Yes, we are. And I was doing a dry January for about 3 weeks just to kind of give it a test run, and it worked out pretty nice for me. But I started back drinking, and tonight I opened up something from my box gift set that I got over the holiday, which is the Vice wine. It's from California. This one is the Petite Verdot 2019. So definitely Bordeaux grape. That's a minor blending grape, but on its own in California Napa terroir is really, really lovely, really delicious. So yeah, so that's what's in my glass tonight.
Hey man, cheers to you. I like that you kind of highlighted some of those things about Petit Verdot, knowing that it's a blending grape, knowing it's a Bordeaux varietal, because it really gets people into what Petit Verdot is and how much they could really appreciate it, especially if they're more familiar with some of those bigger Napa cabs and these other big heavy reds. So that's a great one for that. All right. Let's see here. If I was tuning in just now, I'd want to know what's going on. How did we get here? This is Monday Meditations. You started this thing when?
Last year, 2021, in January, it was a kind of opportunity for me to get back into social media in a more real way, a bigger way, more tangible way, because 2020 was just a mess, with COVID and the pandemic.
Yeah.
So I wanted to reach out to people and have conversations and then get to know people a little bit better, or meet people for the first time that I've never get a chance to interact with. So I did it. I started in 2021 last year without any real purpose except to make connections, check in on people, and then have something that made me consistent for the year. So that was the genesis of that program.
Well, look, you definitely connect with people, and I think that what you're doing now, because this is a passing of the baton. I just announced to all these followers, that I'm doing this thing now, but this is something that you started to connect people. We became friends maybe a year or two ago, and it's been all about connecting people. And this is a really fantastic way to do it because you get different people at the table, people that would not normally be at the same table together over a bottle of wine. So it's a great way to do it. Thank you for your efforts, man. I appreciate you for what you've done in our community, and I know many others do as well. Look,
Thank you.
it's a privilege to have me doing this, but you're you got a lot going on. So you've been doing this for a very long time, the wine industry, right? So let's just go through some things that we know. We know you're a certified somm. We know you're a wine educator. We know that you're an author. One time for that, we got a lot to talk about you being an author.
Yeah.
We know that you're an award-winning journalist, and you spent some time down here in Mississippi yourself.
Yes.
Now, you graduated from JSU
Yeah.
and you worked in New Orleans. I want our people down here in the South to know that I didn't just go get this Mississippi dude. This dude's been around. He's been in the South, he's been in the North, he's been in a big city. So, look, man, I got to ask you this. We know you've done all these things. What was really your introduction into wine?
It's funny that I tell this story and my mom gets a kick out of it. I think she's trying to tune into this session, but it started as a really early age. You ever see these like videos of these kids in like a high chair and they're like reaching for the glass of wine? That was me. That was
Nice,
me
nice.
about a year and a half. I think I took my first sip according to my mom and my aunts. And then I guess I just fell in love with it ever since. And as I grew up in this family in the Midwest with a grandmother from New York, it wasn't really taboo for us to kind of like taste some things with the family or family reunions or functions. Um, but I really got into it, I guess, like, a legal age of drinking in
Mm.
college.
Look, let's talk about that just a little bit because you said you were tasting when you were much younger. I think that only us in the United States kind of consider drinking or alcohol really so taboo to children. Obviously, not in excess, right? We understand what it can do and the damage, but when it's abused. But it's important that we know what it is moving forward. I think that's great because you got your into it. It probably made you a little more well rounded when the time came, right?
Yeah, and then I grew up in the 70s. I was born in 74, so back then it was a little bit more freer time. And then grew up watching things like Dynasty, with the family or grandmom, and just like that whole culture of like cocktails and just elegance of it all.
Yeah.
Watching a lot of food shows on PBS with my grandmother as well. Like Julia Childs, she always had some wine with her. So and the Creole chef, I forget, I think his name. But yeah, so it made me well rounded in that regard, but also made me appreciate wine in a different way as opposed to seeing the negative sides of it in the streets and in the corners and stuff like that. So
I think that's awesome. That's amazing. And I love the fact that you said that you kind of got that elegant, that cultured side of wine. And that is that have anything to do with your brand now, right? The wine stylings. Is that where that kind
yeah,
of leads into in that background?
it does. And so my grandmother Lily in Springfield, she was a classically trained pianist, but she had 13 kids, so she didn't practice music, but we would always watch concerts and old movies on PBS. So I knew about Lena Horne and Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan, and then my grandmother would sing around the house too. So um, I fell in love with jazz. So if you hear like a jazz person being introduced, or like a musician, or like a band orchestrator, and they'll say like the jazz stylings of so and so or whatever. So I got the life stylings, which was my lifestyle business. So based out of the jazz introduction, the life stylings of Charles Springfield, and then when I got into the wine space, when I wanted to have something separate, I just kind of used the life stylings as an umbrella, and it's just started the wine stylings of Charles Springfield. So it was a way for me to introduce myself in that kind of jazz way, but also talk about wine in my personal style and my approach.
Look, I love what you said there. I love the concept of it all. Look, we've never talked about this in all the conversations. My grandmother's a classically trained pianist, and my dad's a jazz musician, and here we
Oh
are
wow.
both in wine. Yeah, no doubt. But you're taking this whole culture thing to another level. Now, the wine stylings. What does that entail? It's more than just talking about wine. It's more than just getting on here and having conversations. Like, what all does that entail? Because you're an educator too. Where do we get that?
Yeah, so I think with like jazz musicians or just you figure any person in lifestyle space, lifestyle experts, they always have their unique spin or take or personality when they approach things. So I always knew that wine for a lot of people can be intimidating, and I know like talking about it or educating people about it can be intimidating. So I didn't want that to be my style. I wanted
Yeah.
to be a style that was more approachable, more friendly, sometimes silly at times, but a way that people can kind of let their guard down and take in this information without feeling like you're being talked to or talked down to,
Mhm.
and things like that. So it was my kind of style of approach to wine education.
You know, you like to dumb it down, right? We did music. That's what we would say. If you were incredibly lyrical, you got to dumb it down. People don't understand you, and we see that in wine a lot. I can get geeky about wine, and I will lose them at
Yes.
fermentation. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I want to know
Yeah.
what it tastes like, Chuck, and you make it easy for them. But you don't just make it easy for them in a classroom. You make it easy for them through one of your books, right? The Less is
Yeah.
More approach to wine.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's one of your books, and the other one's the rose. So tell me about the less is more approach, because I think people really should know this, right?
Yeah, so it was after teaching wine classes for like going on 9 or 10 years. I knew I wanted to write a book at some point in my life. I didn't really know what it was going to be about, but after all this experience that I've had, and also teaching like hundreds of classes and thousands of students in New York, I was like, wow, let me just and my style has been really well received from a lot of students. So I said, let me just package this in a book because for a long time I was anchored in New York City, and a lot of people didn't know me outside of New York City, and they're still trying. Starting to get to know me outside of New York City a lot more with the book and these other things that I do now. But for a long time, I was really anchored in Tribeca or like Manhattan, teaching these classes. So I said, let me do something to expand my approach, expand my reach. And book, the Less is More approach to wine, which is like when I was a journalist, we had to write to like a sixth grade, eighth grade level, so people can understand. You
Mm.
want the masses to understand things. So you don't want to really use big language or words or vocabs that's going to go over their head. So I kind of brought that approach to my writing, is my teaching, but also in the writing of the book. Like you mentioned, if I do go geeky and I go too deep into the nuances or nitty gritty of education, you will lose people. People will yawn and their eyes will get glazed over, and then they're like, okay, can we move on to something else? So I wanted to be an extension of my personality. I wanted to be fun. I wanted to be like lyrical writing, feature style writing. I wanted to be silly but very educational at the same time.
You said something. First off, you're educating me, right? We're we're wine professionals, and a lot of times us as wine academics, we have to do a lot of writing, and some of our certifications require us to do more writing. Um, so it's got to be a really daunting task. It feels that way for me, someone without a journalism background. Is it a big task? Was it big for you coming from journalism to writing books? What was that transition like?
Yeah, it was for me it was fairly seamless, although like writing a book is completely different from writing articles or and things like that. But I started my journalism career basically on the campus of Jackson State University, JSU. I was working at the Blue and White Flash, which is a campus newspaper. And so I started off as a writer, and I moved into like feature editing and feature writing for the newspaper, and just covering everything from like entertainment. Nancy Wilson came down to do a presidential concert, the jazz artist, and then I got to cover that concert, and do like spotlight people in Mississippi like Cassandra Wilson, who's in the jazz world, and then I moved transitioned to the Times Picayune, just covering a bigger thing in a bigger city. So like course crime, parish government, feature stories, lifestyle stuff, on a daily basis, writing 2 or 3 stories a day for publication. And then I left the Times Picayune and started grad school in Jackson State. So then I was working at the Clarion Ledger, but also in the feature department. So a couple times a week, I was doing like television stuff for the TV book, feature stuff, and writing feature stories and articles, and also entertainment stuff like I remember at Hal& Mal's back in the day when I was in Jackson, the Black Eyed Peas performed at Hal& Mal's, but that was before Fergie joined the group. It was
Early, early.
yeah, yeah. And then you think about the Black Eyed Peas, and if anybody's been to Hal& Mal's in Jackson, it was tiny space back then. I'm not sure if it's expanded,
No, it's
but
still tiny.
yeah.
It's
So
still
like
tiny.
all the kind of indie concerts and fun stuff like that. So that was my writing career. I think the thing that helped me with writing the book is in order to graduate with my master's, I had to write a thesis.
Okay.
Um, so my thesis paper, which is a book actually, it kind of gave me the kind of scope and approach on how to write a book.
Mhm.
So I wrote a series of papers. I took the approach of writing a series of papers and then plugging those papers together for a larger book. And so when I wrote my first book, I broke the writing down into chapters, and then made sure that the chapters kind of seamlessly went to each other. So
Mhm.
write the chapters out, then make sure they connect some kind of way to make sure it has a very cohesive approach. But it's a big process. Now it's a big process. So for sure.
Sure, it takes time. It takes a lot of time. Um, First off, I know it's mad cool that you had a chance to cover Nancy Wilson coming down here, especially
Loved
with
it.
the jazz background, man. Uh,
Yeah, I was in
I could
heaven.
I could only imagine. I'm gonna say right now, I'd be gushing, and I don't know that I get much work done. I think I'd just be enjoying the experience so much. Um, Beautiful woman that she is, and impactful. That lit me up a little bit right there, man. And then also about because wine academic, and I'm just gonna talk to you as just like a wine student, wine academic, real quick. Compartmentalizing, right? Just thesis papers, putting those pieces together. We teach classes, right? The classworks that you write, putting those together, and then it turns into something like a textbook. Um, I think it's really important for wine academics to be able to find a different way than just studying this stuff, right? So now you're studying with purpose, and then you start to retain the information that way. I imagine that you took in a lot that you didn't expect to learn, as you do anytime you study something. But did you have a different goal in mind when you started writing this thesis? Obviously, you were trying to graduate, right? You had to write this thing to get out, but did you and you wanted to write a book, but did you have a different goal than the wine stylings brand that you're doing now?
Yeah, I think I mean the goal for me at that point was that I really love journalism. I love that whole concept of discovering stories, focus on stories that are untold and or not spoken about. Really focus on communities that get overlooked and overshadowed, and that was really my big passion for journalism. But at that time, in the early 2000s, journalism was changing a lot. You know, we were going to
Hmm.
start to go digital, and then we still have those, but it was a big thing about like big mega businesses or companies that kind of parent companies, and then
Hmm.
so you have these merging of newspapers and things like that. So it was just changing, and I felt like a transition was happening. So I said, let me try something else because you also get a lot of kickback and pushback on the things you want to do as a minority or black writer or reporter. So I was like, let me see if I can do something else. When I went to grad school, I studied PR and advertising, but my thesis coincidentally was about the number of black people or minorities leaving America's newsrooms on a yearly
Oh,
basis. So I was actually trying to understand the Exodus, but then I guess I was part of the story as well, without really realizing it.
yeah.
Because I didn't know. I mean, I wanted to work for the New York Times, or like Vibe magazine or something like that. That was
You
the
wanted to
goal.
shine. We all want to shine.
Yeah, that was the goal back in the day. But things shifted, so I switched over to advertising PR. But there's a big writing portion in that as well, and public speaking and presentations and things like that too. So.
Look, I think we all notice if we are reading and paying attention to news, we notice that shift, right, from print journalism to digital readings. When was that for you? When were you experiencing this writing? Like when did you graduate?
So I got my master's in 2002,
Okay.
and I wanted to. The goal was for me to move to New York. Um, I had reconnected with my family in Manhattan, who lived in the Upper West Side, and also Harlem. But it was right after 9/11. I graduated
Mhm.
like a year after
Yeah.
9/11, and I mean the country was a mess, the economy was a mess, but New York was really bad. As far as
Like
trying to.
that was ground zero.
Yeah, exactly. Literally, yeah. So I had to kind of figure out. I didn't know what I was going to do exactly. I didn't know if I was going to continue journalism, or if I was going to go into PR and advertising. But it took me a little while to figure it out, and then I got a job working in PR and advertising at this big agency. We had a lot of big clients, and I kind of fell in love with that because it was a different way to tell stories, and different writing, and different way to connect. And I loved that we also had like a philanthropic aspect to a lot of our marketing campaigns. So that was always nice to be able to give back to communities or even suggest a philanthropic leg to a program.
Man, it sounds like through everything that we're talking about, there's this defined passion to connect people, to help people, which I believe that anybody in hospitality, to be a true hospitalitarian, you've got to have it in your heart and in your mind. You got to make it up that you're here to help people. For us in restaurants, right? I'm a restaurant guy. It's beyond just selling, pasta, selling food and beverage. It's about creating an experience. I say sometimes that when we have busy nights or busy weekends, we're not saving lives. We're selling chicken and steaks. But in this instance, we may not be saving lives, but we're saving a night because we're trying to help somebody have a better night than they had before they walked in the door, before they sat down at the table. Right? It's up to me to make sure that this experience makes their day or evening better. So we are doing more for the people. It's You're helping people, you're
Mhm.
connecting people, and that's what you've been doing. Now, you've been doing that through your books, you've been doing that through your journalism, and then with the PR firm. With all of this, you started off enjoying wine, right? The family introduced you to it, you knew what it was, and I'm sure you did some drinking at Jackson State.
Oh yeah.
you know, um, and speaking of that, what was the wine scene like in Jackson when you were here? Then, what was it like? Because I moved here in 18, but you were here much earlier than I was.
Yeah, so I graduated from my with my bachelor's in '98. So I was one of those people who took a leap year from college between high school and college. So I deferred
Mhm.
my enrollment. So I think I was over 21 by the time I graduated with my bachelor's. But I mean, it was like a small campus. Like we for campus and house parties, we used to throw a lot of parties. I used to live at the Advantages, not too far from where Bravo is located, in North Jackson. So, but our idea of like parties were like Franzia, other things, and then like a little bit later, I got into like going to Bravo, and then like drinking at the bar or with dinner, just having like I think the first wine I really fell in love with at Bravo, it was a California Merlot. I think this was back in the day, so like in the late '90s. Murphy Good was the producer,
Oh yeah, yeah,
and it was just like I was like, wow, like it was almost like reconnecting with wine, but on a higher level than just like the college house parties. You go get a nice fire burned pizza,
uh-huh.
have a shrimp cocktail, whatever. Just
Yeah.
enjoy. And then of course we drank a lot of martinis at Bravo too.
Hey, the bar is still just as hot as it was when you were here, and
Yeah.
a little bit more because they have this really cool beverage director in place now. His name is Chuck Nix. He's the bearded wino, so he makes sure that people are drinking the best stuff. You should come back and visit sometime and have a martini and a better Merlot than Murphy Good today in
Right.
2022. Right? No, no.
Yeah.
I think it's really really awesome because that you're telling me this and it gives us some insight. Right? They always say you don't know where you're going if you don't know where you came from, and I'm talking about the wine culture in Mississippi, 2002, and it was Murphy Good as the Merlot. Right today, I'm serving a right bang Bordeaux because it's Merlot based, right, to expand people's minds in what to drink. Um, that kind of evolution, right, that kind of change and where we came from. So you talked about your um, talking and writing and reading about being minority in journalism. Okay, so minority in journalism from a smaller market to then Manhattan. Did you see those, challenges when you were here in the South and then in Manhattan? What are the differences like being minority in your fields?
Yeah, it was really interesting because the last few, I think the last 2 years, well, I was only in grad school for 2 years. So I think the last year of my grad program, that's when I reconnected with my family in New York. And then
Mhm.
when I worked at in Southern Style at the Clarion Ledger, I wrote all kind of fun stuff and all kind of feature stories. But um, one time I remember, and back then I had locks, I had dreadlocks, and
I saw
so
the pictures. I saw 'em.
yeah, and
Oh yeah.
so I used to like, we Clarion Ledger's right downtown, and I'm doing interviews all over the place, and I kept seeing people stare at my hair. And so I was like, I need to write a story about this. I just need to tell people what this hairstyle is and give them a little historical perspective of what it is. Um, I didn't do the etiquette about not touching the hair without asking. I didn't do that. Um, but I wrote a story and I actually won a NABJ award for that story for educating people about dreadlocks or locks, and telling the whole history of it and historical perspective, because a lot of people didn't know if they weren't used to it, or if nobody told them about it, then how would they know unless they actually went to go research it themselves? And then the internet was just like starting to get big around that time. So I don't think people were just like, oh, what's that on his hair? Let me go Google it, because that wasn't around
Yeah.
back then. And the same thing with Kwanzaa. I did a story about Kwanzaa, and then I did some things that were family related. So like my sister, she had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. So I did a story about kids with arthritis and how to deal with that and what's the best way to do that. So I looked at the world that I was in or living, and kind of to talk about those stories. But I guess the biggest disconnect between Mississippi and New York, when I went to New York, we would go to like the Sugar Bar with Ashford and Simpson. They own that, and then we would spend time in Harlem, and it would be like live jazz and things like that. So it was like, everybody had locks at the time. It was a whole different kind of scene, and I think it was just different culturally. But when I finally got here, it was just if it's the opportunities are there, but it's almost like you have to know some people to get those opportunities. So in a
Yeah.
smaller place like Mississippi, you have the Jackson State connection and the mass comm department, but you had to work a lot harder to kind of to get into the fold in any kind of media here, broadcast, radio, print, or magazine, and even back then, like digital was starting to emerge too. So.
All right. So you touched on a couple of things. That was really awesome. So look, it sounds like, and help me if I'm right with the way I do this. You think black people are a little bit more free in your communities in New York, is what it sounds like. It sounds like there's more of a community and more of an understanding to our culture in New York, right, than
Mhm.
in the South. Okay, but then also in professional world, it's more difficult to advance in that larger market area because it's more congested. I imagine
Yes.
the competition level is high, and then down here, it's you get to kind of play big fish in little pond almost a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, and even at that, what an opportunity though, because you really get to highlight. Think about that article you wrote about locks, and think about the articles and the broadcasting you did about Kwanzaa. Do you think you would have gotten the traction in an area like Manhattan at the time for those
Now,
same
a
topics?
story like that would they would say like, oh, we don't need to do that story. If I was in New York, it wouldn't be relevant because people, for the most part, would understand it. But it was more relevant for me to talk about that in the Black South, through writing, through the newspaper, than it would be in New York City for sure.
Look, it brings it back to making things approachable for all people. I could tell you right now, I could pull a handful of black folks that don't know the history and the things about locks and about Kwanzaa, right? That you can talk about and educate about. And then the same thing with your wine books. Now, the rose book, I got to ask you about rose. You are a rose expert. Can I call you a rose expert?
Yeah, a lot of people do. So yeah, I'll take that.
Well, we did a class. We did a class when I first met you. I was in one of your classes, and you were teaching about rosés from all over the world. And thank you to you and Vineyard Brands and Black Wine Professionals for throwing that case of rosé at me. It's fantastic. I appreciate y'all. But let's talk about rosé. Is rosé your favorite wine?
I don't know if it's my favorite, but I'm intrigued by the wine. I do love rosé.
Okay.
It's not like I drink it hashtag all day. I
Yeah,
do
yeah,
some ones that I really adore. But it was like it was timely. Like my journalism sense went off when I started seeing more and more rosé hit the market and more people drinking rosé.
yeah,
And then I went to a seminar where that was presented or sponsored by Provence, the Institute of Provence for Vin de Provence. And then they had all these stats and statistics and historical perspectives and numbers. and even projections of the rosé category was going to grow in popularity all the way to the year 2035.
Yep.
And then that was 2019, and I was like, wow, this is, like I had some story ideas for books in my docket, but I was like, let me do this book. This rosé book needs to happen now. So that's kind of how I started that book and that journey.
And I'm sure that's garnered you much opportunity because I mean, rose blew up, right? Rose's still blowing up. I can't keep rose on the shelves. You name it, I feature it, it's gone, and then I have to deal with the Mississippi ABC to get some in. There's a fight itself, right?
Yeah.
So, what is it about rose? Like I know you said you went to the thing, you got all the information, and that intrigued you. Um, why rose? Why not sparkling? Why not Bordeaux's? Why not another style? Because you were introduced to all of them.
Yeah, I think because rosé is one of those categories that although it might be popular, there's still a lot of misinformation and a lot of things that are unknown about it. Even the historical perspective, just knowing that Provence was the birthplace of rosé, and that actually started by the Greeks, in the south of France. Um, so back in the year 600 BC, like going back to there and how Provence changed from like a fishing town to like the Côte d'Ivoire, the French Riviera,
Yep.
that whole thing. So it's like it has a really interesting story, and I think I'm always drawn to stories, but also underdogs, because some people will say like, "Oh, I would never drink rosé. That is not real wine. This isn't that." And so, I'm kind of also a proponent or like supporter of the underdog too. So I really wanted to educate people about the beauty of rosé through the history and through selections from all over the world, rather than this one style. Even though I love Provence rosés and they put us on the map, but there's a lot of different styles around the world that people can find more interesting or more suited for their palate. So,
I
yeah.
love that you said that, and I was really trying to get you to get to all that geeky information that I can't do at a table. Because you started talking about the history and where it came from, Greece and Provence, and how it evolved, and all these things. Um, that is what I love about rosé. So many different styles, so many different expressions. I'm nuts over sparkling rosé. I'm crazy about it, right? Even different styles of like Lambrusco that looks like rosé. All right,
Yeah.
so what's your favorite style of rosé?
I think I do love rosé champagne for sure.
Yeah.
Um, I've had a lot of really interesting ones. I think the most interesting one I had was through a party in Tribeca. They had a leftover. They had a little bit leftover 1979 Rosé Cristal
Oh
Magnum.
yeah. Oh. Yeah,
So
you have good friends.
yes, so I was able to, in some of those parties, we had a little leftover juice and we were able to drink it, and it was delicious, and it was just so fascinating, and it stood up. This was a couple years, probably 2017 or 2018, but a 1979 rosé champagne stood up, all that time, was still very drinkable and delicious. Um, I do like rosés from like Oregon, or like I like the Van Gris style that comes from California, really dull,
Mm.
but also riper grapes in a sense. And then like I like the flexibility and creativity that American winemakers have
Yeah.
with making their rosés. Like Theopolis, Theodore Lee with the Petite Sirah rosé, which is deeper and darker.
Yep.
And then you have, I think it's Raymond, has the Cabernet Sauvignon rosé in
Okay.
Napa.
Okay.
So
Um,
all
I
kind of
was
fun.
I was reading Kermit Lynch's The Wine Route. I'm saying the title wrong, but the Kermit Lynch Adventures on the Wine Route. He talks about Bandol, and he talks about Bandol Rosé in the book. And what I thought was amazing was he was talking about Bandol and its ability to age, but then he was saying, but they're drinking the Bandol Rosé like everywhere else is drinking just the wine of their space. But this stuff is ageable. When you talk
Mhm.
about ageable rosés, I think that that's one of the most interesting things when you have a rosé that's made from one of these high structured grapes like Cabernet or Mourvedre, and it can last for a very long time. And it takes away, it beats the argument that rosé is not real wine, right?
Right.
Add the history, add its versatility, add its many different origins in different places. How is it not real wine? How is it not standing up to some of the bigger reds and all these other really fun and interesting and trendy whites wines that people are drinking all the time? I love that you have highlighted rosé in that way because you really help the market. I can see why they're reaching out to you. and you're really touching, well, you're touching people, man. You're touching many people, and I can see the passion. We talked about the less is more approach. We talked about you connecting people. We talk about rose, and I can see your passion for educating in that aspect. um you have more fun writing the rose book than the less is more approach.
Actually, I thought I would. I thought I would. I was really like the idea. I got so excited about this idea because I was still my first book hadn't even come out yet. It was like it was going to be
Mm,
released like a week or two later, and so I'm already working on the second book, and the first book hadn't
right.
even hit the market yet. I was so excited about the idea, and I did my book tour for the first book, like limited tours and stops, and then COVID hit.
Mm,
Um, so as soon as I started, really getting into working on it in early 2020, then like plans already made to go like flight down to Atlanta and some other places in the South, which I missed for the first book tour, had to be canceled and scrapped, and then it was just like a hard time to be creative. We had this unknown illness, like people were dying from. Then we had all these police brutality stuff going on, and it was just hard to be creative. It's hard to be black, like and watch the news, or even just like it was just a really crazy times. So I had to. It was a labor of love. I had to force myself to kind of really focus on it because I almost scrapped it for a while, and I was like, let me just finish it because I'm not sure what's going to happen next year. We who knows what's going to happen with the world next year. So
you know all these things. No, you said it's hard to watch the news being black, and it just made me think about all the things we went through, especially during COVID era. Because what a weight dropped on not just black folks, but all people, but definitely and especially black folks in those times. Um, and then after writing all these books, after educating people, after connecting people through all these times, right, we found our way to really bring people together and bring some light into people's living rooms and into their dorm rooms or their devices, right? Because we were all stuck in front of our screens. And then Monday Meditations happens. And then not only are you doing all these things, now you're a TV producer.
uh,
So my wife
yeah.
hates that I don't give myself sleep, but when do you sleep?
Oh, I love napping. If when at Jackson State between classes, I would nap until like for hours until I had to go back to another class. I love the nap, so that helps me out.
Power naps indeed. Power for you. All right, let's talk about it, man. What's going on with the new show?
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, as we were, stuck behind our screens and trying to connect with the people, and I think everybody, like we were, even though a lot of negative stuff was going on, there was a big movement to uplift Black people in the Black community. But even just like not only Black people, like you mentioned, but just all people, but also people of color. Um, so it was a really encouraging time. So I got this email out the blue from a network producer who was like starting a network owner starting this new streaming network,
Okay.
and he found some stuff that I did back in 2018 on YouTube. There's some stuff I produced myself from my own YouTube channel, and really liked it. And asked if I how what I feel about having my own show on his streaming service. And I was like, "Is this for real?" I had to do like some research.
Yeah, you
research
did. Yeah, you gotta check it.
And then I was like, I said, okay, where like, can I watch anything now? He's like, yeah, we just got like basic programming, but it's from the Black diaspora around the world, so you can download it on Roku or whatever. And then so I looked at it, select quality, and he gave me the title of being and the freedom to be an executive producer and also the host.
Right.
So yeah, so I was like, if I'm in control of it, um, and I've done this before because I also studied broadcast at Jackson State too. We had a TV station on campus. I think they still do, but I worked at the TV station too when I was on campus. So I was like, it goes back to my formal training in mass comm, and then it lets me be a TV journalist, to tell a docu story like series style. So yeah, so we've been working on things. It's been hit or miss because of the pandemic, but we're working on the pilot episode really soon, and then once that happens, then we'll knock out the rest of the episodes.
All
So
right.
yeah,
So it's a docu series, and
yeah,
you're highlighting, what are we documenting?
yeah. So it's called The Sommelier with Charles Springfield on Nubian Television. You can download the Nubian TV on Roku, Apple TV. I think Fire Stick and things like that. Now there's starting to be some original programming, but it's taking a look at the wine community, but from a Black or African American lens.
Mm-hmm.
And so while we'll focus on the community, we'll put a very special emphasis on Black and Brown people in the wine space. We'll sample a lot of their wines, have some interviews, but also talk about food and wine pairings and do a lot of education. The pilot is really going to be talking about what is a sommelier and what does that mean. And like as you and I we probably have different interpretations or definitions of it, and I know a lot of people do, from consumers to other professionals. So we're really going to dissect that and do a lot of wine education, really showing that this wine world belongs to all of us.
Yes.
Wine is humanity. It's a human beverage, and we're humans, so it belongs to all of us. And it's a way for me to spotlight that we're here, and we've been doing this for a while. There's some people who've been doing it longer than I have. So I want to put a light on those people, and then just have some really fun conversations, show people a lot of cool things, introduce them to winemakers, Black and Brown and women winemakers from around the world. But it's going to be a very special focus on New York City. So we have this really cool, vast culture here. So it'll be mostly that. And even if we can, at the end of the season, we'll probably do like a spotlight vineyards or like urban wineries and talk about the winemaking process, and then etiquette of, best practices on how to visit vineyards and how to get the best out of those experiences.
Man, I'm telling you, Charles, what you're doing, moving the needle, what you're doing, expanding culture, wine culture into different communities. We saw it happen in 2020. We saw the doors kind of open up. It moved from beyond having to have an invite and travel and spend a bunch of money to get to the spaces where you could learn about wine and get involved in the industry, to it being on the screen. And now, by you doing this show from the African Americans perspective, right, or the minority perspective, for all people that weren't necessarily invited to the table, man, I'm intrigued, I'm thrilled, and I'm proud of you, man, for what you're doing.
Thank you.
This is quite amazing, and I can't wait to check in. So I'll be definitely downloading the app. I think everyone else can. You said you can download the app and you can watch it on Roku. You can stream this on all your devices, I'm sure, too, right?
Yeah, Apple TV and Fire Stick and things like that. Yeah.
That's going to be amazing, man. We can't wait to see it all. I'll make sure I get myself to New York, because I want to, I'm going to just walk by production. I'm going to just be the extra that keeps walking by.
Oh, if you're in town and we're filming you, I'm pulling you into an episode for sure.
I'm just going to walk by with a glass of wine. That's it, man. All right. So look, man, you've been doing this for so long. You've accomplished so much. And now what you're doing with Wine Stylings and then with the new show, did you have a title for the show yet? Can you reveal a title yet?
Yeah, it's just the Sommelier with Charles Springfield. Yeah, it's just
the Sommelier with Charles Springfield. All right. So that's coming up. Do you consider yourself more of a journalist, or do you consider yourself more of a wine industry professional at this point? Because you've done so much.
Yeah, I think it's funny. Like I didn't plan all these different things. I think it was like the universe had this path for me, and all I had to do was kind of walk down it. And it's like a amalgamation of everything coming together. So the way I like to think about it, it's like a lifestyle media budding empire, where it's where it comes with books and TV and classes and programming and things like that. So I think of it as like a hybrid. It's a lifestyle media communications company that focuses on lifestyle, food, wine, travel, and things like that. And that's the best way I can kind of describe it, as it's kind of evolved over the last.
Man, just talk about evolution. You're certainly going to help evolve a lot of people, culturally speaking, into what this thing's doing. So thank you for that. All right, look, man, there's some things that I want to know. A lot of people want to know. So let's dig into it. All right. I get questions at the bar and I ask them to other people. It really sparks conversation, and it puts people together. So if you could share a bottle of wine with any person, dead or alive, who would it be?
Wow. Yeah, that's a big question. I would always go back to like either my jazz roots or Harlem roots. So like when I walk into my apartment or I leave it, there's a picture of Dorothy Dandridge. There's a picture of Leonard Hughes. There's a picture of Jean-Michel Basquiat. But I was thinking I would actually probably choose my grandmother, who's no longer here, and have a glass of wine with her as an adult. She passed when I was 17. So just pick her brain on how she grew up and what she had to go through and her love of music and jazz. And then if I could just tell her, we turned out all right,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so yeah.
Oh, bless him, man. That's great. That's great. I love that answer. All right. So, what grape variety or style best describes you? You can't say rosé at this point now.
Yeah, yeah, no. I think like, I feel like a kinship with the underdog or like some grapes that are overlooked too. So I would probably say Carmenere. It was like the lost grape of Bordeaux, but found this new home in Chile, and has this really unique, distinctive quality to it. Kind of juicy, smoky, spicy, very nuanced. And then I would probably best relate to Carmenere. Plus, it was like one of the first red grapes I fell in love with when I moved to New York and started working in wine because I had never had it before. I was like, wow, this is different. This is unique. So
I love it. Oh man, that's a good one. I did that never crossed my mind. Like I know the story, it never crossed my mind for anybody. That was great. All right. If you could drink this bottle of wine, you could die happy. What bottle would that be?
I always I get questions about people wanting to buy a birthday vintage for someone. So
Hmm.
I think if I could have a 1974 Dom Perignon, I
Okay.
would, yeah, I would like to see what that's all about.
I'm glad you said that because, see, for me, I think a lot of people go, big reds. And I always say if I find an 82 Bordeaux, that's going to be like the birth year wine. But then I also think, like, would that 82 Bordeaux still be good? Well, first question would be, would it be real at
Yeah.
this point? Because it was such a big year. That's great. Oh, yeah, Dom Perignon. I know that's going to be shining. I know that's shining. All right, look, you got $20. What bottle of wine you going to buy?
Okay. $20 was something that I just love. Every time I have this wine, it's always like a good time and brings back memories. And it was such a pleasant surprise when I found it.
Hmm.
So it's a rosé by Andre Mack called Love Drunk.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I mean the name alone, but it's just so delicious. And then I think it still falls in around the $20 range.
It does. It does. Probably more so for y'all. We got the Mississippi tax, so it just gets right outside the out of bounds. But no, you're right though. You're right though. It's got a little residual sugar. It feels like it's not so dry. It's really approachable. That's great, man. That's great.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, I don't know if I think we pretty much answered it. But if you weren't in the wine industry, what would you be doing today?
yeah. I think I would. I've been fortunate to do a lot of different things professionally and just like as hobbies or like semi-professional. I think if I wasn't in the wine industry, I would either be a jazz singer or I would be some kind of designer.
Charles,
Yeah.
can you sing?
Oh yeah, I can sing.
I'm not going to ask you to sing.
Yeah, not after this petite.
No, 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 I gotta say, I didn't know, man. You're a man of many, many talents, man. A man of
Yeah,
many talents and a man of many gifts. And a man has been blessed with many opportunities. And I think that you're going to touch many, many people. Thank you, Charles.
thank you.
Not just for this time, but also thank you for giving me a call saying, "Hey, Chuck, I got to do some other things. You want to jump in here?" I'm really happy to do this Monday meditations with Wine thing and connect more people. Thank you very much for all that
Yeah,
you've done.
and thank you for like just. I didn't really know what I was gonna do with it after the year was over with. So, and it didn't seem like it would fit organically into what I was doing next. So I'm so glad that you were open to, carrying this on forward and putting your spin on it and bringing your personality and your questions and your group of guests. So I can't wait to kind of watch it and see how it unfolds and evolves and see what guests you have on, learn new people that I probably am not aware of, and just share in this journey with you. So thank you for taking it on. I really appreciate it.
Man, thanks so much. Look, this has been great. Um, it's been a busy day here. We finished inventory, we finished some wine classes, and we still got work to do. I'm happy we got a chance to talk, man. Thank you so much. And we're going to talk more in the future, man. I'll catch up with you on emails. I'll shoot you a phone call because we got some other stuff to talk about anyway that it
Yeah,
ain't for everybody. All
yeah.
right. Hey, Charles, you enjoy the rest of your day, brothers. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much. Cheers. Cheers, Bravo.
Man. Hey, indeed. Man. That was our talk with Charles Springfield in Manhattan. An amazing conversation, amazing dude. Thank you all for checking in. I'm happy that y'all were here. And look, we're going to be doing this every Monday. Monday Meditations with Wine will be every Monday, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. I'm going to be talking to another friend of mine or somebody else that I know that's doing amazing things in the wine world, in hospitality, in culinary, um, in the South predominantly, but we're really just trying to expand our culture down here. So you know that we're doing amazing things. And look, again, stop by Bravo, have a glass of wine. Let's talk more about it, whatever you're interested in. And we'd love to have you at one of our events. And you can find those events and those listings at bravobuzz.com. You can also connect with me on Instagram at Bearded Wino. And you can also just email me, chuckin at bravobuzz.com. I love to make new friends. And if you're doing something in the wine industry, please reach out. If you got something that you think needs highlighting, let's reach out. Let's have the talk. It could be you talking with me on Monday Meditations with Wine. Look, I've taken up about an hour of your time. Thank you so much for it. I appreciate y'all. Peace.